Yo, what's good with you? Back in black with another Enlisted video. If you guys are new to the channel and you love shooting games just like me, make sure you aim for that like button and shoot that subscribe button as well. It'll help you find better teammates and improve skill-based matchmaking. At least I hope so. In this video, we're going to be comparing both BR5 rifles for the Western Allies and Enlisted to see which of them is the best for you overall or for your particular playstyle. Coming up first, we're going to be taking a look at the M2 carbine, which according to the Enlisted description was a further modification of the M1 carbine, obviously, but this one was capable of firing in both semi-auto and fully automatic. This improvement was adopted in October 1944 and used sparingly throughout the final year of the war compared to the extensive use it saw in the Korea War. For maximum damage, we're looking at 7.3 per shot, which is lowest in the tier, and out to 100 meters that'll drop down to 5.7. Since we're below the killing threshold of 10, we're always going to need at least 2 shots to kill, usually 3 to 4 unless you hit them in the head, in which case you only need 1. Our bullet velocity is coming in at 560 meters per second, which is pretty decent, but still falls the lowest in the tier, and that should be expected since we're running off the same chassis as the M1 carbine, so you're getting the same velocity you had back in BR2. Where the M2 carbine is going to start seeing preferential treatment is going to be in that fire rate, which comes in at a first place stat of 750 rounds per minute. Immediately the M2 carbine goes back to losing on the reload speed, which comes in at 2.8 seconds, but I'll be fair and say it's not losing by a lot, and that trade-off honestly may very well be worth it considering we're getting a tier best magazine capacity at 30 rounds per reload. Ironically, the spread or the shot deviation on each gun in the competition today is going to be tied at 28, which is pretty solid for those mid to far range targets, so long as you adhere to discrete bursts with your weapon as opposed to trying to mag dump your foe every time you see somebody. Speaking for long range targets in particular, I'd honestly recommend trying to use that semi-automatic function here and there, since it is also present as we mentioned in the description. I'd believe you'd be negligent not to at least try taking advantage of the versatility presented to you when targets are at least 60 plus meters away. In regard to the recoil, the control percentage is coming out to a tier worse but still very useful 70%, and you'll honestly need it because our vertical recoil is coming in at a pretty high 54, but for what it's worth, that is still lowest in the tier. The horizontal recoil is boasting the same tier best stat at 17, but as you can see, just because a stat is best in the tier doesn't necessarily mean it's a good stat in general. Generally speaking, the recoil pattern is going to go up sharply and pull to the right with increasing magnitude over time the longer you hold down the trigger. Hence the name carbine. This weapon is going to be the least harmful to your stamina, coming in at 2.9 kilograms, but the sprint factor for both rifles in the competition today is going to be tied at 100%, so nothing cool to note there unfortunately. Last thing I wanted to mention for this rifle is going to be the iron sights, and I hate to say that this will more than likely be the most deplorable part of using this gun because it's going to be forcing you into close range situations more often than not, simply because of how hard they are to use. I have used worse iron sights in the game generally speaking, but I definitely don't have much positive to say about using these in any way, shape, or form outside 20 meters to be precise. And heaven forbid you're fighting somebody in a poorly lit building or in a dense foliage environment, you almost want to use the hip fire over the iron sights the whole way through. One more thing I did want to note about the M2 carbine that stuck out to me as I was recording this video is that both rifles in the competition do indeed come equipped with a bayonet, but I feel that considering the M2 carbine is more of a close range nature leaning weapon, you would probably get a lot more mileage out of the bayonet using the M2 carbine than you would using the other rifle that we're going to discuss in a moment here. So not necessarily that it's a bonus, but I do feel that the bayonet is more so acclimated towards this gun than the other one where it is more of a supplement. Neither here nor there. Coming up last but certainly not least is going to be the T20 rifle, developed by none other than John Garand around September 1944. Essentially, they got the M1 Garand to become an all-arounder weapon by giving it a BAR magazine upgrade, full auto capability, a muzzle brake to help with the recoil, and the ability to mount a scope, which, the M1 Garand kind of already had that, but mostly planned to be used in a hypothetical invasion of Japan, but as we know, that did not come to fruition. But all of these upgrades would go on to become the M14 later on down the line. Neither here nor there. For our maximum damage, we're coming in at a bold 12.7, and out to 100 meters that'll drop down to 10.4, which easily clears for highest in the tier. And with both of these numbers being above the killing threshold, you should be melting all squads at all ranges unless their soldiers have vitality, in which case it'll take one extra bullet. But even then, it's just one more shot, so it's not really that big of a deal. This claim to being effective at about any range is substantiated by the bullet velocity coming in at a tier best 830 meters per second, so your bullets will get to the target pretty instantly, which kinda sounds oxymoronic, but The rate of fire, on the other hand, is taking a backseat to the M2 carbine, coming in at a tier worth 650 rounds per minute, which is still pretty solid up close, but you may want to also highly consider bursting with this gun. Reason one being our magazine goes down to a tier worth 20 rounds per reload. Speaking of reloading, the time for that is also coming out to a tier best 2.3 seconds. And that makes sense to me since we're getting less bullets overall in the magazine, but the difference is almost negligible. As previously stated, the shot deviation is tied neck and neck at 28, so you'll want to burst with this gun all the same outside of point blank range. But what's peculiar about the T20 is that the recoil control percentage is even higher than that of the M2 carbine at 75% instead of 70, making it even better or best in the tier for active controlling of the recoil. Perhaps it is necessary since you look at our vertical recoil coming out to a tier worst 87 and our horizontal recoil coming out to a tier worst 29, which is worse than the tier by a mile, honestly. So you'll definitely need that extra recoil control percentage to control the bull. The same way the M2 carbine has a recoil control pattern that essentially goes up and to the right, you can expect the same thing from the T20 here as well. Since the M2 carbine is the lightest gun in the tier, you should know by default that the T20 is going to be the most stamina intensive gun, coming in at 4.2 kilograms, but hopefully by the time you unlock this gun, stamina won't be much of an issue for any of your soldiers. Last thing as usual to mention is going to be the iron sights, which are supremely superior, which I don't even know if I should put two adjectives together like that, but these are way better than the M2 carbine for all ranges, and I'm sure 90% of you would agree with that statement without me even having to expand on it too much. But even with that being said, I would still probably recommend using this one in semi-auto way more than the former gun, so you can get a little bit more efficiency with your smaller magazine. So yeah, man, in conclusion, if I had to choose one of these rifles forever, or if I had to recommend one to somebody with limited silver, I think I have a good idea which it'd be. And before I get into my breakdown, I'll ask you this as a primer. If we scale both of these guns back as far as advancements are concerned, we'd essentially just have an M1 carbine and an M1 Garand, right? So that prompts me to ask you, as the person watching this video, if you had to choose between a M1 Garand or an M1 carbine, which would you feel more comfortable with in this game if you only had one? And you could essentially apply that same principle to this tier. The T20 beats the M1 carbine in pure stopping power at all ranges. It reloads faster, it requires less shot leading, and even offers better handling to account for the higher recoil, the same way the bullet offers more damage to account for being less of them in the magazine. This evaluation ranges from the average to the high skill player, but honestly, the better ballistic performance on top of the much better sight picture when aiming should make this the easy pick for first place in the tier. And if the recoil becomes too much of an issue, you can always opt for the semi-auto mode and still proceed to one-shot most people you come across, on top of making much better use of your magazine. And like I said earlier, both of these guns come with a bayonet, so you're not really missing out on much there either, in my opinion. And like I said, definitively that makes the T20 the best rifle in BR5 for the Western Allies. But of course, that's just my personal opinion. I am curious to know what you guys are thinking down there in the comment section. Are you going all in on the T20 all the way like I am? Do you believe the M2 carbine is better all around? If you do use both, which one do you find yourself using more of? And for those who are not in BR5 yet, hopefully with the combination of my gameplay and my explanations, you can decide for yourself which rifle is best for you to spend your silver on, buying over and over again and upgrading over and over again for your rifleman. If you found anything I said useful or insightful, don't forget to aim for that like button and shoot that subscribe button as well. Help you find better teammates and improve your skill-based matchmaking. And share this with somebody who you know who's not in BR5 yet. I'm sure they will find it helpful. At least I hope so. But other than that, appreciate you guys very much for watching, and I hope you guys have a lovely rest of your day. Black Guy out.